Virginia has a long history of shaping America and our democracy. That's why we're so passionate about making sure every election is safe, secure, and accessible to voters. Virginia Department of Elections officials and volunteers are dedicated to making sure your vote counts. Whether it's a race for school board or for the presidency, we have processes and safeguards to ensure safe, secure, and accessible elections. Learn more at vote.virginia.gov.
This is Jordan Poyer, safety for the Buffalo Bills, and you are now listening to Cover One Buffalo Podcast. Let's go.
Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo Podcast. You are joining your host, Greg Thompson, along with my very handsome, well-rested partner in crime, Aaron Quinn. Aaron, have you recovered from the primetime matchup?
Nope, I hate it. Everything about my week except for the Bills' success and the content that's become because of this success. That's the only thing that's been worth it. Everything else I've screwed up. I've fumbled stuff. I haven't gotten anything done. My house is a mess. You were joking offline about Rob Lowe's character and Community being a fine-tuned machine that, but it's like a super processor that if it gets a bit of dust on it, it's all over the place. That's how I feel. And I'm still in a drunken state of celebrating my guy Taron Johnson's extension. I haven't even gotten to talk to you about this. I was on vacation in Michigan, so I was with family and friends and stuff, and really busy. I didn't even get to fully celebrate that extension. We saw the Bills released the YouTube video here this evening, which if you haven't got a chance to watch that, I suggest after this show, go give that a watch. But really happy about Taron. So I thought that this episode was just going to be a Taron Johnson gushing episode, and so I didn't even prepare for the Titans. So I'll prepare while you take over the rest here.
That makes sense. That makes sense. No, it's been awesome, and I have consumed so much content over the past 3 days. I have listened to snippets of every single national show, all the local shows. It's fun when the Bills are rolling and have as big of a win as what it was. It's easy to just kind of let it wash over you, and I've enjoyed every moment of it. But tonight's content is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Download the Underdog Fantasy app. Use promo code COVER1. Get yourself $10 free. I've been doing pretty good there, being able to go along with it. I know you had a really nice run too.
I pulled some money out. I paid myself to treat myself, baby.
That's right. Treat yourself. Uncle Jumbo's. Make sure you're checking out everything that our friends over at Uncle Jumbo's have going on. We'll be looking forward to the Uncle Jumbo Spotlight later on. And another sponsor for tonight is our friends over at Colby Development. Colby Development is a commercial real estate company offering a variety of services in the Buffalo area. Colby's customer-centric approach makes your commercial real estate experience gratifying and memorable. With projects grand or small, Colby Development is your strategic partner. Obviously, in today's day and age, there's a lot of questions in that commercial real estate space. If you are looking for guidance and advice on how to be able to maneuver your business, make sure you're reaching out to them. You can find their website in our show description, colbydevelopment.com. Make sure you check them out wherever you're watching this show. But without further ado, tonight we are shifting gears. We're moving into game preview mode, and we are shifting into Bills Titans. And who better to talk Bills Titans than our man from the Believe Podcast Network, Davey Hudson. Davey, how we doing, sir?
Hey, Greg, Aaron, I'm doing well. How about you all?
Doing all right, man.
Not too bad.
I mean, hey, we got two teams that are coming into Monday Night Football for prime time. I know you guys are just coming off a prime time game, so back to back, but Titans fans are looking forward to this matchup and should be an entertaining one. I know the Bills are firing on all cylinders right now. I mean, I'd go out on the limb and just say they're the best team in the NFL, and I don't think anyone's going to really argue with me at this point.
It's really, really fun to hear people say that and not think they're crazy. That's a first in my life. I haven't ever really experienced that before as an adult. So I'm going to enjoy it while it's lasting. But talk a little bit about the Titans season so far. I know it's we'll get into it in the matchups, but obviously it's been a bit one-sided on one side of the ball so far. But they're making do with it. You know, some solid wins. 3-2 at the moment. But what are some of the things versus your expectation? I know there's probably some hope that the defensive side would step up a little bit more, but I think the offense has been right there with what expectations are, and obviously Aaron will get to King Henry in a bit.
Yeah, the biggest thing right now for the Titans is we've not been able to see this unit at full strength. It seems like the injuries have just overshadowed this entire season, so it's one of those things to where Titans fans are really still kind of on the edge. They're like not ready to fully jump in and be like, all right, this is a really good team, or this is just a solid team. Fortunately for looking at the rest of the AFC South, the Titans are very fortunate there. The Colts, Texans both only have 1 win. Jags have 0. So it's not a question of what the Titans are going to, whether or not they're going to make the playoffs. It's what they can do once they get there. And so just simply based off process of elimination, looking at all the other teams, and fortunately, I mean, the Bills, even though they're playing at a high level, are kind of in the same spot when you look at the AFC East. But when it comes to the Titans, man, it's been so night and day. They really just play to the competition, whether that's good or bad. I really do kind of throw out that first game against Arizona. I mean, Arizona just whipped them up and down the field, but it was one in which just nothing seemed to go right. Titans bounce back. They get a big win in Seattle. I know if you look at the wins that the Titans have, nobody has a winning record, but I don't necessarily think that's indicative of how this team has played. There are obviously a lot of great things. I know you guys said you're going to mention Derrick Henry here in a minute. The dude is unreal. He's currently on pace for the Hall of Fame. And so as long as he's able to play at a high level, most Titans fans think that they're going to be able to be in any game just because it's so difficult to tackle him. And he does a lot as far as opening up the passing game. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, really concerned there because Shane Bowen taking over as the defensive coordinator this year, but it's not exactly gone according to plan. And it really just, we're still kind of waiting to see if this team starts to figure a few things out, especially on that side of the ball. And it's really just, we're kind of up in the air. And this is the first true test that the Titans have. And so I think after Monday night, Titans fans are really going to have an idea of what they can expect from this team moving forward.
And so I want to touch on that before we dive into the team itself here, the fan base as a whole. I'm sure that you're on Twitter interacting with the fan base a ton. What is the anxiety level? Because you mentioned it, right? It's 3-2, but it's pretty much a lock that you're going to win that division and coast to the playoffs. So is there a high anxiety level in the fan base, or do people realize, hey, you guys don't really need to be playing your best ball until November, December, heading into January, right? Like that's when you want to be playing your best. Where is that battle between anxiety of, is our team good enough versus let's wait and be patient because we don't need to be good enough yet?
That's a great question, Aaron, and really everyone's all across the spectrum. When you look at it, you do have the fans that are, all right, this team is set up for win now mode. For when you look at all the transactions and pieces that they've tried to acquire over the last couple of years, we realize the shelf life for, Ryan Tannehill, he's on the wrong side of 30. Derrick Henry, we know what it's like for running backs whenever they start to get up there. The tenure for that position is not that high. So you look at that, obviously adding Julio Jones, he's a guy that, he was injured last year, but he's also been one of the best wide receivers in all of the NFL over the last decade. And so a lot of fans are thinking this team should be better based simply off the talent. It's like, is there some deficiencies at the coaching ranks? What exactly is slowing this team down? But you do have some that are also in that camp of thinking, fortunately, and they felt a lot better after Monday night whenever the Colts blew a 16-point lead in the fourth quarter, which is always great to see if you're in my shoes. So it's one of those things.
We would enjoy the Patriots or the Dolphins doing that too.
Yeah. So it really did, I think, actually ease a lot of the tension for the fan base because they realized, man, we're up 2 games on the next opponent in the division, and we're 2-0 already.
Doesn't look like it's going to get any harder in the division. No.
So it's like, it's as long as you can win the AFC South, you got a chance. And Titans fans, at least when you go back a couple of years ago when they made the run to the AFC South or the AFC Championship, people weren't thinking, hey, this going into that playoffs, this is a championship team. This team's going to win the Super Bowl. They just got hot at the right time and were able to keep that momentum rolling. So that does allow for a lot of fans to be like, all right, well, if they can get everybody healthy and they can just hit their stride at the right time, then there's going to be those opportunities for them to have success and make a deep run come January.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense, and we'll dive in a little bit further now with the matchup itself. And you already hinted at it. It's no surprise for me to come on here and say, Davey, I did some research here. The Titans' defense isn't great. That's something that is.
No one's going to argue with you on that.
Well, the interesting part is it's not without talent. So Jeffrey Simmons is a monster. Like he can be a game wrecker by himself. Kevin Byard is a legit Pro Bowl, All-Pro level safety. You have I guess depending on where your thoughts are with the pass rushers, I like the individual talents of a Bud Dupree and being able to figure out where Harold Landry's coming from. Why do you think we've seen the level of talent, at least within, heck, throw in Danico Autry? If you have a defensive line, most fans in here, Danico Autry, Jeffrey Simmons, Bud Dupree, Harold Landry, they're thinking, oh, well, that's got to produce above average pass rush. That's got to produce some results. Why do you think the talent hasn't matched the production to this point with some names that people recognize?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's scheme, and I will say Bud Dupree, we've not been able to see him much. He was able to practice today. I wish for the show right now we had a practice report just to see where everybody was, but because it's a Monday Night Football game, the teams will not be releasing that until tomorrow. So we're kind of looking at, all right, well, I do know that Julio practiced today. I know A.J. Brown was out there, and as far as the receiver standpoint, when you look back at the loss for the Jets, that was the big issue. You just had no playmakers on the outside, and the defense just allowed the Jets to make plays, former Titan Corey Davis. But I guess to really answer your question, a lot of it's scheme. It really is. And people are kind of curious about if Shane Bowen's going to be able to stick around long term because they are really questioning it. But, I mean, Harold Landry, I think I was reading the stat that he's the only player in the NFL so far to have at least 5 pressures in every game. So he's getting there. It's just you've not seen a lot of times the Titans actually do get the sack, but they're actually forcing a decent amount of quarterback hurries, and they're creating some of that pressure. Now, once Bud Dupree does get healthy, does that help on the outside as far as adding that extra element? I mean, you kind of saw that whenever he was in Pittsburgh with him and TJ Watt. It really did take that the Pittsburgh defense to another level whenever it came to getting to the quarterback. So Titans fans are still kind of just holding out hope that happens once Bud Dupree gets back. The safety issue, outside of Kevin Byard, we were kind of last year he had a down year. Right now, according to Pro Football Focus, he's grading out as one of the best safeties in the league. But if you do look at the other safety spot, they signed Amani Hooker, let Kenny Vaccaro go this offseason, thought Hooker's going to step up. He's been on IR basically since week 1. He did get designated to return today, but it'll probably still be a while until they get him actually back out there on the field. So, and then you look at the cornerback position, guys just keep staying banged up, and they're just blowing a coverage here or there, but they're really hit or miss. If you go back and you watch the second half of that Seattle game, Seattle only scored 6 points in the second half, and that was on a blown coverage, where Tyler Lockett just got behind him and was wide open, or Freddie Swain at that point was wide open, no one within 20 yards.
Well, I mean, you hit on it. It was even hard preparing for this, looking to be like, I'm a huge fan of Jayon Brown, and I'm looking to be like, oh, well, okay, so he played a ton game 1, and then he had little snippets trying to come back in game 3 and game 4, then wasn't able to go, and you're trying to look and be, okay, well, who is actually getting the reps? And you take a look, I mean, really, it's Janoris Jenkins and Kevin Byard are the only consistently available guys. It looks like they're moving Christian Fulton into that slot role.
And he's hurt right now, so
not giving him a full run of reps. Give me 2 different versions of it. When healthy, you hear some of the names and that obviously some higher end talent that people are excited about in that back group. If you were to get everyone back and be able to put together, Jayon Brown, and that you get the version of Caleb Farley people thought was possible, and then you get, Elijah Molden playing, and we liked him coming out in the slot. Christian Fulton, there's a lot of names that we liked in the draft prep and that were there. If it comes together, do you think it has that potential for the end of the season versus what do you think we're going to see Monday night with what's being patched together now with who's available?
For Monday night, I'm really up in the air. I'm hoping that they can draw something up to slow down Josh Allen, but I'm not thinking that's going to be realistic. It's more of can you outduel them on the other side. But the Bills' defense, I mean, when it comes to scoring defense, they're averaging the lowest amount of points allowed. So it's really going to be a battle there. I really am curious what Shane Bowen is thinking going into this game, and as far as how he's going to try to draw it up. Right now, I would say try to make it to where Devin Singletary and Zach Moss are going to be the ones to beat you, but it doesn't seem as though that's the Bills have just been able to do whatever they wanted to so far this year, and I don't necessarily think that that's going to stop come Monday night. Now, hopefully the Titans, what I would like to see is if they can force a few turnovers here and there, they're really going to have to play a bend but don't break style to where, I think you're going to see the Bills put up a ton of yards, but can the Titans, once they get down in the red zone, really limit the Bills to where it's like, all right, they're just going to have to send Tyler Bass out there to kick a field goal. And in that situation, if you can hold them to that, I think they'll be able to make it a lot more, or a closely contested game, more than the experts are thinking right now.
So the last piece here is, as we're looking through with what's there, do you think we haven't seen a ton of blitzing so far? We haven't seen a lot. It's been trying to get home with those fronts. And I think that some fans misunderstand the same thing in the Bills fandom is they see different guys coming and they assume that's a blitz, but really it's often that, hey, it's still 4 guys. It's just not the 4 you expected. Do you think there's been different, schools of thought in how to approach Josh Allen, in that everyone loves the idea of, no, we only want to send 3 or 4, we want to drop 7 or 8. That sounds great, but if nobody's getting home, it's not being able to do it. Do you think this is a game where maybe you see them ratchet up some of those more exotic blitzes, some of those more cover 0, play a higher variance game to cause some of those turnovers you see, or do you think they're going to stick with more of the send 3 or 4, drop 7 or 8, try to make you dink and dunk down the field? Do you think this is the time to try to play that variance?
I think it'll definitely start off as the Titans are going to try to make you dink and dunk and just limit that explosiveness, the big play ability, because if you can slow that down, that's definitely going to benefit the Titans. I think if the Bills are able to get behind the secondary, then at that point they might try to get a little bit more creative, send somebody you're not necessarily expecting, try to get a safety involved. Or, Elijah Molden, they've sent him a couple of times now, and he's been able to at least put some pressure there. And it's more of just, can you get Josh Allen flustered? But they got to make sure they keep gap control, because, he can take off if they're not staying disciplined within their lanes.
So let's flip this over to the other side of the ball here for a little bit, because this is really what the Titans fans are riding right now, is that the offense has been able to carry them so far through this season and solidify that arm's distance that we talked about within the rest of the division here. But when I turn this team on, it's not the offense that I prepared for a year ago, right? Like, we saw the loss of Corey Davis, the loss of Jonnu Smith, the loss of Arthur Smith, new offensive coordinator, a lot less play action here so far this year, but Tannehill's still playing well. And so I'm looking for your perspective. We know who Ryan Tannehill is, right? Bills fans have followed him closely until he got there. We've played a couple times here. We've had these preview shows. We know who this guy is. What's going on in Tennessee with sort of the lack of success with play action like we've seen in the past, and the not really leaning into that as what we've seen this offense be most successful at? Again, Derrick Henry set up and working off that play action. Why have they gone away from it? And now we're heading 6 weeks into the season, a month and a half into the season. We haven't seen trends of it really picking up either. What's going on? What's the fan base think about this?
Yeah, I would say the biggest reason why you've not seen as much play action is because the offensive line, whenever it comes to pass protection, they've really struggled this year compared to years past. And it's one of the things, as you know, if you're going play action, quarterback's got his back to the line of scrimmage, and we saw a couple of times where Tannehill's taking shots, and it's shots like some he's been fortunate to even hold on to the ball. I know he had one strip sack against Seattle and put Seattle in perfect position just to score a touchdown a couple plays later. So they're trying to limit that. The biggest thing from Arthur Smith to Todd Downing that they're trying to do is get the running back more involved in the passing game. Jeremy McNichols, the Titans, I would look at him as the third down back. They've had him be like one of the team's leading guys when it comes to targets. Derrick Henry, prior to this year, and I wouldn't have suspected this going into this year, a guy that's going to be catching some passes out of the backfield outside of a screen here or there, but they're really trying to utilize him in both phases of that offense, and it's working so far. And when Todd Downing, he's only had 1 year as an offensive coordinator prior to coming and being the OC here, but when he was it would have been Oakland at the time, when he was with the Raiders, he was one of the league's top guys as far as getting the ball to the running back out of the backfield in the passing game. And so that's one of the things we've seen a lot more of. Now, once he gets all of his receivers, the Titans, their top 3 receivers, Julio Jones, A.J. Brown, and Josh Reynolds was expected to be that third guy. We've not been able to see them on the field together. So the Titans, again, I know the injury bug, like, I don't want to use that as an excuse, but it's just Titans fans really don't know what to expect because we've not seen it yet. We're hopeful that once they get out there, it really does start to change things, because we know you can't just, even if you stack the box against Derrick Henry, he's still going to beat you here and there. And it's great that you have that, but if the Titans want to be able to take that next step, they're going to have to continue to have that play action, open up the deep shots. One of the biggest things I expect to see this week is Titans, when they do run play action, watch for A.J. Brown. He'll be backside and he'll run a slant, and usually he can get in the middle of the field, and that's whenever he's able to make a lot of people miss. And they've been able to have some success with that, especially the past couple of years. When you look at a lot of his big plays, that's a lot of the times where it comes from.
Yeah, and honestly, as a Bills fan, Joe Marino talks about this all the time, and you see it on the film. Bills are not always the best sound tackling team, and if you can break a tackle or two, you can get some yards after catch, and that's really probably the way to make a big explosive play against the Bills, because those safeties aren't giving it up, right? You're going to have to get it the old-fashioned way. So great point there for you. Let's talk about that offensive line. You sort of deflected to the offensive line for some of the issues in this play action game. When I look at it from an opponent's point of view, and I look at this offensive line on paper and really in the games, there's been flashes of bad, but what's going on? Because this isn't the weakest group we've seen the Bills go up against. There's some names everyone knows, right? Taylor Lewan, Roger Saffold. These are good players. I was a big on Nate Davis in the draft process. Like, these aren't, no offense to Miami Dolphins fans watching, but this isn't the Miami line that we went up with a few weeks ago. But the results haven't been great here this year. Is Lewan still recovering from that injury? Is he fully back? Is that a big part of it? What's going on with this offensive line 5 games in?
One of the biggest things with offensive lines, when you look at it, it comes down to chemistry. Do you know what the guy next to you is going to do? And half the time, the Titans, they're going to have somebody go out, whether it's a knee injury. Lewan's been in and out this year. Saffold as well on the left side, and obviously that's Tannehill's blind side. They've just been switching guys in and out, and they've just not been able to get any cohesion going there. For some reason, they have been able to put the run game together, even whenever they are subbing a lot of guys in and out there. But I mean, that's if there's one unit, you want to just make sure you consistently have the same guys out there. It's the offensive line, and Titans, we've not seen that from them yet. But at the same time, it's weird how teams really haven't had to get super creative with sending pressure, and they've just kind of broken down at times. Now, on a couple occasions, Ryan's holding on to the ball too long and trying to make something happen. He needs to get rid of it faster. But other times, it's just he doesn't have an opportunity to really help. And I'm kind of wanting to see him get back to being like, all right, you have a really good feel for the game, and you can take off if you need to. And we've not really seen him use his legs as much as we did the past year. Yeah.
And now, one last thing about this team, and really I'm focusing on the lack of success still in that play action game, because I really think that's the thing that if the Titans get that rolling, that's what takes them to that next level, where we saw Ryan Tannehill being one of the top quarterbacks in the league. There was an argument a year ago that he was probably that next tier, right with Josh Allen's MVP type season. Like
his efficiency was unreal.
Yeah, he performs at a high level when that play action game is clicking. So I keep coming back to that when I was watching the film. And one thing that stood out to me, and I want to get your opinion on this, is Jonnu Smith's not there. And that looks like a big hole. And obviously we're not seeing the production out of him in New England, but is this one of those relationships in sports that where one party goes another way and they just don't have the success because they were made for each other? I feel like Jonnu Smith was really made for this offense, and stretching that seam in the play action game and getting open play action, being able to make some stuff happen. How do Titans fans feel about this? Are you missing him big time, or have the guys just behind him not developed to the point where they can be that?
No, the Titans fans are missing him. I still think a lot of them agree that based off what he was going to get from the Patriots, it wasn't something you should sign and devote the cap space to.
Right.
But at the same time, they're also kind of curious how much of his ability would they be utilizing if they had with Todd Downing versus when Arthur Smith was here? Because, Todd Downing's never called plays with Jonnu Smith, so there's still kind of that question mark there of what you would exactly see. The Titans, they do have a tight end in the name of Anthony Ferkser, who's been very consistent in the pass game. Usually if the ball hits his hands, he catches it. Doesn't have the explosiveness and the speed that Jonnu did. But the Titans then went and got Michael Pruitt, who was with the team the last couple of years, but he went on to play with the 49ers during this offseason, and that didn't work out, and so now he's back here. So they've been using some guys here or there, but I really am kind of wondering the same thing. Aaron, you asked it about with the tight end position, are they going to look to get that more involved? Because I haven't seen them try to target the tight end near as much as they have in the past. And so I don't know how much of that is just with what Todd Downing's wanting to do versus, okay, he just feels confident or doesn't feel confident that these guys are going to be able to make the plays if we are to get them the ball.
So speaking of which, let's put you on the spot. What do you expect in Monday night, and what's your prediction of a score?
It's a great question. I'll be definitely watching while drinking some Uncle Jumbos with my friends.
There you go.
Yeah. And it's weird because I look back to last year and the score was not indicative of how close these two teams were. The biggest thing that the Titans were able to do to ultimately get that win was field position. They were able to start in very favorable spots for the offense. And still, I mean, the Titans defense early on, they struggled in third down. I mean, Josh Allen and that offense were converting like 3rd and 13s, 3rd and 15s, and it was just demoralizing as a fan. But the Titans ultimately were able to force those turnovers and get it there. I do think we get a shootout on Monday night. Right now, just until I see that injury report, based off what I'm expecting right now, I do think the Bills come out on top. But I do think the Titans will cover. I mean, they've even outside of that Arizona game, they've just played to their competition. I expect that to continue this week. The Bills definitely looking for revenge. And I mean, Derrick Henry, he's going to get his 30 carries, which is just unreal. I don't know how long that can be sustained, and I'm just praying that, like, you can just
when you're built like
doing
that,
it.
Probably longer than we think it should.
Yeah. He's the Tom Brady of running backs. It just makes no sense.
But right now, if I had to put a score to it, I would come out and say Bills 35, Titans 31.
Okay.
No, we appreciate it, man. Great job coming on here tonight. We really appreciate it. For everybody listening, make sure you check out Davey over at the Believe Network for the Titans. Also does awesome work on the Tennessee Volunteers as well. So anything that you're looking for in the Tennessee area, big win over South Carolina. So hope you enjoyed that one.
It's South Carolina, man. Like I shouldn't be like, I'm not super confident. Like, we're going in, we got Ole Miss coming to town, but South Carolina, Missouri, those are games you should win if you're Tennessee with the resources you have at your disposal. Trust me, I'm not an overconfident Vol fan, but it is one of those things where it's nice just to see us beating the teams that Tennessee historically should be beating.
There you go. Make sure you're checking out all his work. Find Davey _Hudson on Twitter. Find him on the Believe Network and everywhere else that you want anything to do with Tennessee. We appreciate your time tonight. Great job, Dave.
Thanks, man.
Greg, Aaron, you guys have a great night. Thanks for having me, and hope you all enjoy the game on Monday.
Thanks, man. Good luck the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Take care.
All the other games. All the All right. And it's interesting to be able to see the perspective where, I struggled getting ready for this game because of the injury report that he mentioned. Like, the names I was expecting, not that I haven't watched any Titans games. I've certainly watched a few and been able to see parts of it, but they haven't been my first go-to in other games that I'm checking out. So when I started to do some of the condensed ones and I started to go through each of the games, it's like, oh, well, okay, I was expecting to see him and I was expecting to see him. And I don't know what secondary we're going to see. And we talk all the time about the value of the cohesiveness and all the consistency and the communication that allows when our entire secondary has spent 4 and 5 years together. That's tough when you're going up against an offense that's clicking the way Buffalo is right now, and you have pieces in that secondary that just haven't had time on task together to communicate and to understand where they're going to be, even if you're as talented as a Caleb Farley or a Christian Fulton or some of the guys they had back there, which is legit. It's tough to be able to pull that together.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those ones that's difficult because, I do think going into week 6, some of this data really starts to matter, and you start to see who teams are trending towards being. And this is where I start to get excited about some of that data. And when you look at this matchup on paper, it just doesn't favor the Titans in any way. But you do have to add the context to it that there's been this injury bug throughout this team. And I don't know if that injury bug is going to get fixed this week, or even if it gets fixed, is it going to turn into, you talked about the continuity. Just because you're getting those guys back who are slated to be your starters doesn't mean that there's not going to be a period where they also need to adjust to that. And it could take 2 to 3 weeks for them to really find their groove with those starters. So this is a really difficult matchup to evaluate, because when this schedule came out, looking at that team on paper before injuries hit, this was one of those games where I hemmed and hawed. Is this going to be a loss for the Bills or not? Just on paper, how they match up, the names they have, and what those names can do. You haven't seen it healthy. You've seen some sloppy games. I think Davey nailed it. They've sort of played 2 competition, which is pretty terrible when you're playing the Jets.
When it's the Jaguars and
teams like the Jaguars and the Jets, and you play some really sloppy football. And I just think their data is a little noisy. It's hard for me to get a real good look at them. So then you go and watch, and that's a little noisy too. Like you said, it's not the players you're expecting. It's, a confusion on defense. All this stuff sort of pops off to you. But what makes me pretty confident in how I think this matchup plays out is I think the Bills' data is pretty clean at this point. Yeah. Like, I think there's enough data's gone by where it's taken out that Steelers game as an anomaly in the data. And obviously you have the Houston game, and everyone said all these teams that we have, that they've played have been terrible, but those teams have played okay against other teams. Like the Bills still dominated. They didn't play to the competition. They dominated the competition. So I think the data is clean for the Bills, and that's what gives me the most excitement. Like I know there's guys that can wreck a game on the other side of the ball, and I'm usually way more concerned and more conservative. You've been doing this show with me long enough where if there's good enough players, I stay pretty conservative because it can happen at any point. But right now, the way this Bills team's clicking, unless they get a little dust on their hard drive like I did this week, it'll fly it off the rails. I don't think a team like Tennessee and the struggles that they're having right now is going to stop that train.
Well, let's talk about it. I mean, you put together some nice numbers here to show the DVOA. And
it's a nice graphic.
Whoever did this is really talented. You know, and it really shows exactly what you're talking about, that it's hard to be able to kind of balance out how dominant that they've been, but it's showing that, hey, the offense hasn't been perfect, but they've improved and they've gotten steadily better.
There's meat on the bone. That's what's terrifying.
They're not playing their best football.
They're the number one scoring team in the league, and their offense is just hit above average, which I think it's trending. Where the defense was last year, where it continued to trend up throughout the season. I think they are trending in that way. And I think the defense will eventually come back towards, top five after a while.
As much as I like it, they are good. I do think they finished top 3 to 5. They're not the 2000 Ravens. They're not the 85 Bears. I don't think they're a historically great
The schedule
defense.
may lean to it.
But they're going to be good. They're not going to fall back to average. I do feel confident in that. They're going to stay good. I think that it's also interesting. I had the opportunity to do a couple different radio spots this past week, and the topic came up about, hey, how does the fan base really feel? And I said, the best example I can give, and obviously the Chiefs game's different. Everyone's riding high after the Chiefs game. I said, but the best example I can give is that after the Dolphins and the Texans game, there was a healthy skepticism of, man, do you think the offense looks right? Do you think that they're, performing the way that we think we should? And that, is this really to the level we expect? And I said, those games were 75-0. 75-0. They scored 75 points in those two games. And everyone's reaction was, I don't know if the offense looks quite right. Something's wrong.
Yeah.
If that doesn't tell you how far the bar has been risen of our expectations and what we think of this team, it's a pretty great example. In that, one I want to go to next, you did some always are talking about and sharing, is where we're at in toxic differential. And I don't think I can share the explosive plays when you did. It's maybe a little bit too much detail for the screen. But that one's awesome as well. But for the area that we had for toxic differential, this is a big one in the difference between the two teams.
Yeah, this talks mostly just about explosive plays. I had been labeling explosive plays the last few weeks, but I left toxic differential up there because that one night of sleep ruined the rest of the week for me. So I've been making mistakes left and right. But this one is just a good kind of general overview. It just goes over explosive plays and how Warren Sharp at Sharp Football Stats deals with that. Is it's 20-yard pass plays and 10+ yard rushing plays. So not the traditional Brian Billick, but I think it gives you a good example of explosive playability. And this is what we expect from watching these teams, right? Tennessee is going to be top of the league in explosive runs. It's what they do. But the Bills aren't giving up these plays, and you see it here.
It's as much of a matchup as last week, where the third most explosive runs with the seventh least given up explosive runs. It's just like that matchup with KC. Something has to give. And
so for those listening and those here watching, the Bills defense has given up only 6 explosive plays and 7 explosive runs. That's good for 32nd and 31st. I know that doesn't work in your mind, but the fewer, the better.
So the best in the league in pass, the fewest in the league, and the second fewest in run.
Correct. And so this is another thing that doesn't lend well to a team like Tennessee coming in, because they're not able to get the explosive pass plays. And I don't know if that's just their lack of being able to stay healthy is transition to that, or this is their new type of offense. But having this lack of ability overall to generate explosive plays, to generate turnovers, and we could talk about their numbers and total differential in the explosive plays. They're +6, which isn't terrible in the league. Like, that's good enough to be a 3-2, 4-1 team. But they're coming up against the Buffalo Bills, who are +21 just in explosive plays. They're not giving them up, and they're getting them at a nice clip right now. And then you add in the amount of turnovers they have and the turnover on downs. We ended up on Twitter realizing that the Bills are plus 35 right now in total toxic differential. So that's crazy through only 6 weeks of play here, heading into 6 weeks of play. And that's how they're able to win these blowout games and still have meat on the bone. They're not playing clean football because they're generating just these explosive plays all over the field. And I think it's too difficult to beat. It's something that you and I have seen the data on. That I don't know that any of these types of numbers are predictive, but I think it gives you a good showing how good your team is, right? We know they're one of the top teams in the league, but then you need to kind of dig deeper into these DVOA stats, these toxic differential stats, and realize that, yeah, even with the Arizonas and the Dallases of the league, like the Bills are substantially that much better in almost every category.
Yeah, and I think as we see it on Monday night, I think it's going to be really similar to the Bills' offense on Sunday night, in that I think Tennessee's first instinct is going to be to keep everything in front of them, to be able to play it smart, to be able to come up, see if the Bills are disciplined enough to dink and dunk, move their way down the field, see if they'll be disciplined enough to hand it off if they have a light box, be able to force them to do that. And then I think the holes are going to start to show, and that some of those explosive plays are going to come up. And I don't know that Tennessee's secondary is quite as bad as Kansas City's, but just like Kansas City has Tyrann Mathieu, and it's not some Band-Aid that fixes everything. Kevin Byard's good. He's only one man. And
Yep.
that I don't know that they have the horses to keep up with this offense and this passing game, and that I think as the game goes on, we're going to see some of those cracks. And right now, Josh Allen is finding those cracks. He is taking advantage of them. He is pushing to be able to go through and to be able to set everything up. It's really exciting to be able to go through and to be able to create the opportunities that it is to do that. And Anthony, was on earlier, and we're celebrating all of our sponsorships. It's really exciting to be able to show everyone that's supporting the show tonight, especially Colby Development. We appreciate them very much.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, this, I'm feeling really confident, Greg. You know me, I tend to lean real conservative with these games. I saw the conversation about the line going up from, 3.5, and then went up to 6 or something as the week has gone on here. And I think it should be 10 plus. I think that this should be a similar spread. They just put up a 17-point spread against the Kansas City Chiefs. This team has so much confidence right now, so much swagger. They feel back. You got Josh Allen winking and tossing the ball back to people. Like this team's feeling themselves right now, and that's pretty scary. When they went into Tennessee a year ago, or when they played Tennessee a year ago, they weren't feeling super confident at the time. They had some success early in the year, but then they had that tough stretch, and it was a wonky game, and they got out of their confidence early. I think the Bills come into this game, start slinging the ball all around. I think you're right that Tennessee is going to try to keep everything in front of them. I don't think they have the ability. I think the Bills are in a mode right now over the last 3 games here, 3 games really, where they're in dictation mode on offense.
Look at that first drive against KC where it was like, oh, is this going to be a run-heavy game plan? Or are we going to just kind of run the ball all game? And that drive it was. Sure. I think it was like 6 runs to 2 passes or whatever it was. But then all of a sudden, the floodgates opened afterwards. Once they started to find those cracks, it was impossible.
I think they're in a groove with play calling, with game plan, with the players knowing their roles. You're seeing a quiet Cole Beasley for 2 weeks. I know there's been rumblings on Twitter about what does that mean. I think it's just this is the type of offense that they can pivot away from guys 1 week or 2 weeks. They can pick and choose and dictate what's available to them, what they're seeing within the game. This is what comes with the continuity that they've been able to have and the improvement along the offensive line. I think it's just sent a shock through this offense to give them the confidence they need. And confidence is a hell of a drug still. I know people don't believe in confidence and momentum and stuff, but you go into a game like this with a ton of swag where you're going up against a team that's trying to figure it out and might be pressing to figure it out. I think it's a bad matchup for Tennessee this week. And I just think Bills are going to have too much confidence for them to slow it down.
Well, and I think that the worst recipe that they have is what Tennessee wants to see is a Bills team that just slayed their dragon, that just got over the huge mountain that they had been trying to climb. Right. That, you can't beat the Chiefs. I'll believe you beat the Chiefs when you finally beat the Chiefs. And they did. And now, this huge exhale and this huge step back. Well, one, you have maybe the most detail-oriented, constructively dissatisfied coach in the NFL, which is Sean McDermott. He's never going to let them get ahead of themselves or feel too good about themselves or ride too high on things. He constantly preaches that 24-hour rule. He was immediately back in his office doing work on the Titans. The other thing they have going for them is the Titans kind of, embarrassed them in that game and talked a lot of trash, and the Bills remember that, and the Bills want some revenge, I think, and want to show that, hey, that was a weird, fluky game that we had to reschedule 3 different times because of you guys, and then we ended up having a bunch of weird situation and injuries and people who were out. And I know in the chat here they were listing them off with, Milano and Trey White and Zach Moss and John Brown, and there was a ton of guys missing in that game. I actually think we missed multiple tight ends in that game. And the situation that it was, you had the early pick 6 right off the bat, you had the tons of turnovers, and then the game looked worse than what it was. And then obviously later in the season wasn't indicative of the two teams and their talent level. I almost think that's the kind of game they would need again. I think that they would need fluky turnovers and a bunch of weird plays and everything going on. If these teams play 10 times, I think the Bills win like 8. I just think that they are the superior team, and I think you're right. 5.5, I don't know that that's enough for this team Monday night with what we just saw with the Chiefs and the other games. They are not doing what Davey talked about with the Titans. They're not playing down to their competition. They are stepping on teams' throats. They're pulling away. They are not letting up. They care about shutouts. They care about holding teams. They don't give up and start playing bend but don't break or prevent defense late on. They keep bringing pressure over and over again, and I don't know the Tennessee's ready for it.
I'm glad you brought up that this isn't going to be one of those games that the Buffalo Bills sleep on or any type of trap game, because I do think it's actually the perfect game to follow up the victory in Kansas City, because you still have enough ammo that Sean McDermott can fire up on Monday and say, hey, remember this team last year?
I guarantee they've been rolling highlight reels of that game last year over and over again.
Absolutely. Josh Allen's already been programmed for this one. He had a terrible game against Tennessee, and he wants that game back and wants to show them. And that's how he's wired and the chip on his shoulder that exists. And I think that resonates throughout the whole team. So this was an easy one, in my opinion, to follow that up, that big victory, because you have plenty of ammo to chug and say, hey, we're going to back-to-back revenge here, and then roll into an easy slate of our schedule for the remainder here. So I think they want to avenge both of those back-to-back losses and show that that's not the team that they were. And so I think you're going to get a focused Sean McDermott team. And I think coming back to that, you look at not just on paper and on stats, and then you look at these coaching staffs. And when I look at Tennessee right now, I don't necessarily look at an organization. I look at an organization that has, had some success. They have some good players. That window is closing for them, and that the wheels are starting to get a little wobbly on the cart. It's going down the hill, and the wheel. They lost a coordinator to success, which the Bills luckily were able to avoid. When I was listening to Davey, I was thinking about that. What if Daboll leaves and they bring in somebody else, and they have a guy that's not willing to utilize the strength of the offense that you knew existed a year ago? No, thank you. Those are problems I don't want. We don't have to deal with that. Those wheels are starting to wobble off. The new defensive coordinator, wheels are starting to wobble off a little bit. Bills are locked in. Everybody's back. Continuity exists on both sides of the ball. It's a team with confidence just across the board. None of it makes sense to add up here for a Tennessee Titans victory. So I'll go here and give my prediction first, since we've kind of exhausted how we think the game's going to go. Sure. My prediction, I think this might be, I'm going to have to look back on shows, Greg, because I think this might be one of my biggest spreads in a game that I've picked. I'm going 31-17. Buffalo Bills win 31-17. And I think I'm going light on the amount of points that the Bills can score in this game. I think that they use a lot of more running in this game, and so maybe the points don't exist in the way that they have in the past couple of weeks. But I could see it being a 38-17 just as easily as a 31-17.
I'm right there. I have 38-20. I think that that's the kind of game that we're looking at. I think that it's naive to think that they're going to keep Derrick Henry out of the end zone the whole game. He's a monster. But I think this is a great test. Like we've seen
Tannehill
how well the defense has played.
For one.
Oh yeah, and AJ Brown is starting to come back and getting a little bit closer to what he was before. So I think that there's a lot of things that are a good test. Some guys in the chat were also talking that it wasn't just last year. I think they brought up, Josh Allen's 3 games against the Titans, 12, 14, and 16 points. That's not good enough. He knows that. And that's the kind of game. That's also why I think he's taking this very seriously. And I think this is a really good indicator of, hey, that's not the kind of team that this is, and that what we've shown so far the last 4 games with the highest point differential in the NFL, that's an indication of what this team is. And I think this is really going to be able to be that kind of test to show that. Does Starr being back and the health of the offensive line or the defensive line of what we've seen in run support from Gregory Rousseau and some of the other guys, is that going to show more? Are they going to switch back? Do we see F.A. Obata and Boogie Basham go back to the inactive, and you make both Vernon Butler and Harrison Phillips active to have the extra beef on the defensive line?
I like beef.
I think, those are the kind of things I'm curious to see. Have they built the kind of depth where you can choose to do that now? Just like we saw, one game, Cole Beasley is on the field every play and getting 11 catches. And then this past week, they ran more Reggie Gilliam and more Tommy Sweeney and wanted to show more of those condensed sets from what was there. I love it that they have the opportunity to be able to show, hey, this is what we want to do this week. Nope, this is what we want to do this week. And they can go back and forth to be able to do those things. And that eventually this Titans defense is just not going to be able to keep up. They have been a sieve. They got outgained by the Jacksonville Jaguars last week. The Jaguars put up more yards than they did. And obviously a team like that, multiple, ugly, turnovers, literally pick sixes and things like that. You're getting short fields to be able to put those kind of things together to make the score look as bad as it was. But the Jaguars put up more yards than the Titans did in that game. And that's a concern.
Yeah, no, and that's what I'm looking through this defense, especially, and what the Bills' offense has been able to do in terms of dictating. I just don't think they can try whatever they want to keep plays in front of them. I don't know that they're going to be able to the Bills can easily take the top right off this defense in a number of ways. I think yards after catch, this hasn't been a super disciplined team. They're not a great tackling team right now. Like, this defense is just giving up big plays. And so I think the Bills just come out, dictate, throw the ball around a little bit, and then control the rest of the game with the run. I think it's going to be very easy for them on offense to move the ball. They continue to be a team that gets off a clip of 20 first downs a game. Like, I think that all these trends, all these stats just continue for the Bills right now as they ride into a week here, and then they get a bye week. I think they ride high here, continuing into this bye week, and take that confidence all the way through. And honestly, Greg, something we didn't even talk about today, haven't seen yet, the health of Matt Milano going forward. I don't even think that matters in this game. Last week, I thought it made a big difference. If it's me, I'm open to just riding Milano out here until the bye week at this point.
If there's any game on our schedule where I asked you which linebacker would you prefer, Matt Milano or A.J. Klein, the only game on the schedule is the one where the guy has to tackle Derrick Henry 15 times.
Right.
I'll let A.J. Klein be the guy that tackles Derrick Henry 15 times. You go ram your bigger body into Derrick Henry and hope
Matt, you go do some yoga.
Matt, go keep stretching. We'll see you in 2 more weeks. Take a break. We'll see you back for the Jags game. Don't worry about it.
Right. Have Anthony Prohauschka come rub you down real quick, get a treatment. No big deal.
No need to be able to stretch that out. I don't think we need to have
it's kind of crazy how the world turns in a week. It was we need him to be back, and now it's like, okay, well, we could take 3 weeks.
Yeah, just take 3 weeks. Just give it a little more time. Give it a little more time. 2 games in a bye week is perfect. Yeah. Take your time.
Yeah.
So now let's switch over to our friends over at Uncle Jumbo's. And with the Uncle Jumbo's player spotlight, I was really excited to show one that I saw a nice metric from the man Seth Walder over at ESPN. He had what was a really interesting graphic from a defensive tackle standpoint. And with the defensive tackles, it really was showing an interesting view in that you look at one, Star Latuile is up here with, a top 5 double team rate in the NFL. One of the only guys with a higher one is Justin Zimmer, which I would not have guessed. But Star Latuile up higher this way is pass rush win rate, which means he's beating his block in quicker than 2.5 seconds at a higher frequency. And you're talking about a top 10 pass rush win rate, higher than Jonathan Allen, higher than DeForest Buckner, higher than Cam Hayward. Ed Oliver right there in that same group with Vita Vea and Cam Hayward and DeForest Buckner. The fact that Starr is getting double teamed as much or more than any player in the NFL and then winning in those scenarios, plus the win rate is both single blocking and double teams. But the fact that we're getting what was there, and for anyone who didn't see, I put out a tweet earlier with this saying that, I was excited as anyone to get Starr Lotulelei back because I knew about the part being over here on the right of the chart. I knew about the part of how many double teams he was going to draw on Sunday night. They did a nice job explaining how he kept Klein and Edmonds versus Milano and Edmonds clean to flow to the ball and being able to make those tackles. I did not expect the pass rush impact and the quickness and explosiveness we've seen so far. That has been a very pleasant surprise. And, to the point where I don't know that there was any chance I was going to be looking up the contract information to be like, well, maybe we want him to play another year or two after this. Maybe we were lucky that we have Starr under contract in 2021, 2022, and 2023. So I'm just curious. I assume you're in the same boat that you expected one part of the chart but not the other. But it's been a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, no, I'm super pleasantly surprised. I was a big defender of Starr's before he got to this point where he's now actually getting off blocks and rushing the passer and creating disruption in the backfield and generating that type of interior pressure, which we talked about, when we had that Big Four episode with Sterling and Anthony and talking about, what are some of the most important keys of this team. We were talking about interior pressure, but we were talking about it coming from, Harrison Phillips and Ed Oliver. We really didn't think to talk about that type of pressure coming from Starr. All the talk about Starr was what you said was, hey, let's free up the linebackers, allow Ed to play in true position and not have to face some of those double teams. So him generating this type of pass rush, fantastic. I think another thing it talks to is the coaches aren't always lying and giving coach speak when they're doing these addresses. We heard in the summer, after that bumpy start in voluntary where McDermott said something